We're with names and naming. The way that this all began, as I started to say, was the story about a Torah scroll that was burning, and the letters were leaving the scroll and heading up into the sky towards the heavens. A friend said this. It's a very old story, you can see. And she said, Sarah, I read this story, I hear this story every year. What's it about? Do you have a way of imagining what this story is about and how you could represent it in imagery? And so I thought about it for quite a while as to what could the letters be made of, that they didn't burn and get destroyed, but they got released by the heat of the fire and were heading up towards the heavens. So it came to me that when I imagined it, these letters were made of light. They were released and they were returning to the heavens, where the heavens contain all of light and all of time that's stored in that light. It's measured in that light. So that's what it says here. And this is how I pictured it in my own imagination to draw an image, to tell the story through imagery. That here was the heavens, and that there was a word associated with that light, and that was illuminate. And that it was associated through a core Hebrew idea, core idea that came through the language of Hebrew. That's found here, and that's or which means light. Okay, so it was about light, so I used the word illuminate to resonate with that. And then part of this journey to discover what that meant was about wrestling with the idea. How was I going to create imagery? And so wrestle became the second concept. But how was I going to create an image that meant wrestling? And to me, that meant knots. Something that was knotted indicated that there was a wrestling going on. And its core Hebrew root, three-letter root, is here, and that's what we'll be talking about today, and I'll bring that into the conversation shortly. And the last part of this was about creating the imagery and then bringing it in through my form of expression, and that was to connect with it. This three-letter grouping creates an invitation to join me on the path, to come into the work, and that's where we're going today. So, and the story that's involved with this wrestling, because I thought about each one in the form of, well, where would I find that within the text of the Torah, the text of the Bible? The wrestling part comes from the story of Jacob, who wrestled with the angel. And Jacob's name was changed. It was changed to Israel or Yisrael, and that's where we get this idea of names, naming, and achieving a name that comes from your actions. So here's how this appears through the project, through the work of the imagery of the project. This is where we're going to find this root and this concept. So it's about the light of knowledge and the knowledge of knowing your name. That's what this journey, this chapter of the journey is about. In order to go on this journey, I created what I call a visual meditation. So something that you can have in front of you that gives you an opportunity to understand how to travel through this gallery that's going to contain the work. And to begin the process, the first way to travel through it is with following this way: universal, eternal, and timeless. Universal is this search for names and to understand the names that are given to us, the ones that we achieve. As Smitty so beautifully told us about his culture and his way of achieving names within his culture, each group of individuals throughout time has used words to name things. We all have the same raw materials, and it's the story that we layer on top of it for each group that takes us to different places. these things have occurred eternally throughout time, and they could happen at any point in time. So that's why I came with universal, eternal, and timeless. And as we go through the imagery of the work, the exhibition, our mini exhibition here, we're going to look for universal imagery and just appreciate that as we go through the work. So within the imagery of the work, and you can see the panels here on the wall, these are just small mock-ups of the panels. This is the size that they are in the work and in the front room. We can see that there's the heavens. That's the first panel. There's light and dark, so the dark of the heavens and the light of the atmosphere. There are trees, which are universal. There are seasons, the light of the seasons. And there's geometry. I'm sure there are plenty of other examples that you'd find, but are some of the few things that I was here to point out to you. So again, this is a scroll. The first set of images are on a scroll, which moves from right to left, a scroll being a form of carrying information, like a book, but this is a scroll of images. Mostly scrolls were about text and text-based learning and transforming and sharing information through text. But as I said, this is the story, a complete story in images. This totally is about 50 feet long. It's going to be about 50 feet long as it goes down the wall of a gallery. This section is called, this is a transliteration of the Hebrew. So Torah min hashamayim, here it is in Hebrew, and it was called the heavenly Torah or the Torah from heaven. So the story, the book, the Bible that's in heaven, or the one that comes from the story that's there. And this is where we find our wrestle for today. So again, we have the black of the heavens, we have the white of the atmosphere. This too is a scroll going right to left. And the letters on this scroll, it's as if the scroll itself within the atmosphere captures the letters that are ascending back up to the heavens, the letters of light. So this one's called Torah Ora. That's a transliteration. Here's the language as it's written. And it's the Torah of light, or the light of Torah, the light of the teaching. Here's where our wrestle is found today, right here on the wall. And this is our story again, in English, about names. So then what goes down the middle part of the gallery is also a book. It's a book of trees. It's an accordion book. So it zigzags through the center of a room, going from colors associated with the seasons: winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring. So the cycle of the year, the cycle of the light of the year. And the trees here are 18 trees that are found in the text of the Torah, the Bible, the Old Testament. This section is called Pardes. Here it is in Hebrew. And translated, it would be interpreted as paradise, a paradise of trees, or an orchard, where you have all of these trees gathered. So on one side, we saw the trees that were in their color. Here, the surrounding area is the color, and the trees are in white. And these are the trees. These are the 18 different trees that are found on these panels. There's their common names, but all of their scientific names, the Hebrew names, all of the deep study to get the information on these trees was part of the work of researching all of this. This is our tree. So here where you can see the tree here in its color and its glory, with all the particles below it, you can see the tree that would be on actually on the other side of the accordion book. that's here. So they reflect each other. This is our wrestle tree, and it's an olive tree. Olive tree was chosen because it's the national tree of the state of Israel. Israel being the name that Jacob's name was changed to. So another element we have that's universal in this universal category is all of the geometry. The geometry is what I call particles. They're particles, they're a universal ancient language. So you don't need to speak somebody's national language in order to communicate through this form of mathematics with somebody. It's universal, it's timeless, and you can see how old the discovery of these particles is, and yet they're just as, in my mind, perfect and beautiful today as they were then, probably. There is a form that's called sacred geometry, and that's about understanding that there's a spiritual meaning, a perfection that's involved in these three-dimensional pieces. And it's about using measurements for sacred spaces and sacred purposes, whether it was in churches, buildings, sacred paintings. When you had this geometry operating in it, it just became a form of what was called sacred geometry. Here's the geometry that's part of the work. So it moves from triangles in a mathematical progression to squares, to pentagons, and then to hexagons. You can see all of these particles in the front room. They're up on the bookshelf, and that's a beginning of understanding. When I came to understand that geometry was going to be a part of this, it was understanding that each of these concepts, each of these 18 concepts that are part of this work are multifaceted in how they can be interpreted today. So those were the particles that were in the heavens, and in the heavens they were magnetized to attract the letters, and that's how the letters became part of the sides. These are the particles that have now gone from the heavens and fallen beneath the surface of the soil and contain the light energy from the letters and are nutrients for the trees. So as they fall to the ground, just like in the heavens, they're uncountable because there are so many of them. Below the surface of the soil, they're also uncountable because there are so many. They're drawn up into the trees and form the words. And then from the words, they also move out into the air, and then become part of these atmospheric particles, which are, again, moving their way back to the heavens with their letters. So that's universal, eternal, and timeless. So the next section is about language. So I want people to go through just understanding the imagery of what's there, but then people came to me and said, look, I know that there's words there and there's information there. How can I get into it? So this is what I'm hoping will happen in this level of going through the word. We have root, text, and context, and it's all about the words. Here's our word as we drill down through the imagery. This is the root that we have. This is Hebrew letters. You don't need to read these letters, but if you recognize them as shapes, you can understand that they contain information. This is our first letter, and we're going to talk about that. So we want to start with the understanding that language comes out of symbols and shapes to become letters to transmit information. We went to a museum in Eugene, saw this on the wall. It's a symbol. It's universal. It can be understood universally throughout time. Anybody can come to it, and that's what it is. It's a symbol for a square. What we call a square, maybe somebody else calls it something else, but it's a square. These are symbols. They have more of a story. The square just is a square. This has a story behind it. You might have a different story than I have. The artist, Keith Haring, might have a different story. But he's used recognizable forms to indicate that there's more than just a symbol. It's got something of meaning behind it, but it's pretty free-floating as to what it is. Then we came upon this. It was in the museum. It signified something. It had information. They were letters, but there wasn't any way I could crack the code. And for most people, Hebrew is that way. And learning a language that has a different alphabet is very challenging at this point in time and in life. Most of the information in learning is coming visually to people. So, as Marilyn said, you know, what do I want people to learn? Well, there's a lot here. But to make it simple enough for people to travel through it and get something, go from point A to point B in what their experience is what I want to do. This was what was on the wall. It just really didn't even tell me anything, and there was no way that I could get into it. This is how Hebrew develops, because this work is affiliated with Hebrew. The first layer are images to transmit information from person to person. So there's a steer's head, a person, a wheel, a hand, an eye, okay? And then the next evolution of the letters of the alphabet go a little ways to moving away from the actual images to conveying information. And the next two were the next development of the layers of information of the language. And the last three rows are how you would find Hebrew today. So this one is a form of letter that's used in sacred writings. It has little crowns on the top. And this is a block letter and a script letter. This is our letter that's in the center of our guiding principles. Its name is Aleph. It's Aleph. Letters have a name. They also have a sound. This has no sound. It's a silent letter. But it begins the alphabet, which in Hebrew is titled Aleph Bet. And it has a very mystical meaning that it contains everything. Mystical as in Kabbalah, which is the mystical aspect of Judaism. It contains everything. So besides just individual letters, we have groupings of letters. And across the top of these panels, you can see that there are groupings of 3 letters. These are all the groupings. There are 18 groupings of 3 letters. They go across in their gathering groups. And these are the words that I associated with each of those groups of 3 letters. So the first one, and we've talked about, that's our invitation to go on this journey. Illuminate, wrestle, and connect. Then each of the 4 following layers are about characteristics, attributes, love. But again, I encountered how was I going to do a picture of love without using any human beings in it. I didn't want to use a human image. So I understood that love was multifaceted, and that's how I got to the geometry part of this work. And that the way we see love is through words and deeds. The next one is justice, righteousness. So justice is on one end of the spectrum and righteousness on the other end of the spectrum. And it goes from one to the other. And its 2 characteristics are courage and truth. The next one is about what is the teaching that's in the Torah or in the Bible or in the Old Testament. Information that contains holiness and wisdom, and that source, that book, has been the foundation of, information through Christianity, Muslim. It's an important book, a foundational book for those religions. And then the last piece is to remember as an attribute, to remember that There's a whole range of living that comes between slavery, which was the story of the Jews as they left Egypt to become a people, and the holy rest that occurred after the 6 days of creation, and the Creator rested on the seventh day. So between those two ends of the spectrum of living, there's all sorts of things that can appear or disappear in a moment. And just to remember and keep that in your presence, that life can be change on a dime, put it that way. And then the last line is about having a way to become part of the group through all of these actions, from the very place that you stand, through mitzvot, commandments, but really through these ways of living, you can become part of the covenant that contains your threads of connection, and you can connect to the sacred energy. Okay, so here we are again. This is our root. These are the letter names, Sin, Resh, He. In the booklet that's on the table, when you have a chance to look at it, there's this letter, which is our letter here, Sin, Resh, He, and it's pronounced Sara, okay, as our names are. So out of these roots, out of these powerful little gatherings of 3 letters, you can come up with many words in Hebrew. You have a prefix and a suffix in order to make these 3-letter roots grow into words. And here you can see on this tree that's up here, you have an array of words. They're laid out in what's called this is a tree from the Torah. The array is called a Kabbalistic tree of life, so it's laid out as a tree also. And these are words from the Torah, which is also called the tree of life. So you have this very powerful setting of trees, and you can see clearly here what's a prefix and a suffix. Okay? And this is how these words are translated. So you can see that the name Yisrael, which became Jacob's name, appears many times here because it also became the name of the people. And our root is at the bottom. So then these individual words gather into text as to where I found them within the text. And here we have our tree again. But now the particles from the ground have moved up into the tree, through the roots, through its root, and out into the atmosphere. Where the words on the tree are in gold, those are the ones we just saw on the previous tree. And where they're in silver, they're from another tree, another root. So now we have the words, but most people, I mean, I probably couldn't stand here and read that as Hebrew myself. So what I did was I brought together 2 other people. We took all of that Hebrew on this and created contemporary words to put them in a context for today. And that was a project that took about 3 years to come up with all the words. We took the ancient words directly from the Hebrew, that was biblical Hebrew, that was written at that time, and then has just been written and rewritten and copied. It's always copied by hand. And in the booklet you'll find where the word is from the root. It's in yellow, highlighted in yellow, so you can identify it quickly. And it's in bold below and written out as a poem in translation. So again, we said, he, meaning Ha'el, said, no more shall your name be Yaakov, it shall be Israel, for you have struggled. And those are our 2 words that come from the root, both with Ha'el and with human beings, and shown yourself able. So that's our root. This is how his name appeared in Hebrew. And instead of trying to read it, just look at it as shapes. So it's something where you can identify, here we have the 2 letters from the root, the 2 letters from the root. This was his name, this became his name, and this was struggled. And this became the name, here's the root, and here's the transformation because he was became a follower and had wrestled with the Sacred One, this was the name for the Sacred One, and you can see the 2 letters that come down to be part of his name. And then there was another story, okay? This one has 1 word in it, and this is how it's translated. And El said to Avraham, whose name previously had been Avram, his name got changed to Avraham. Sarai, your spouse, she shall not call herself by the name of Sarai, for her name is Sara. Her name got changed. Sarah's got changed. Her name was, this was the way her name looked with a suffix. This is the way it became, way it looked, way it became. And this letter here, right here, is what she acquired when she became a follower. Okay? So as Smitty was saying, we have family names, and this is where I wanted to have you bring forward maybe some of the things that you were thinking of. So family names, maybe sister, mother, brother, aunt, grandmother. Titles or degrees, chief. Formal name or casual name. What are some of your names? And how did you receive them? The meaning, meaning of your first name or last name, and where did it come from? And have you chosen a name for yourself? Have you ever done that? So when it talked about Sara, my name is Sara, as is Sarah's name. But when I was born, my parents gave me a Yiddish name. They didn't know Hebrew, so they didn't give me a Hebrew name. And it was Shane DeLea, beautiful Leah. So when Wrestle as Sara showed up on the first panel, people said to me, well, Sara, your name is on the panel, but I never associated that as being my name. Okay? And that was at the beginning of this work. Well, now that it's been going for so long, and I've been on this journey for so long, and I understand Sara is about wrestling, I say, okay, that is my name. I'm willing to be called by that and recognize that as part of my name. So it's part of a opportunity to understand where you are and to take a name for yourself. Give yourself permission to do that. This is the root text and context. So we're talking about names, we're talking about words. But what comes next is understanding there's an opportunity through each of these roots to move towards the awesomeness of what you get when you have these threads of connection. This is all about illuminated letters, so the letters of light, but it's also about the threads of connection. And as we went through the room today at the very beginning and talked about our threads of connection to one another, I hope that each of you has had an opportunity some point in your life to be somewhere, whether it's out seeing the stars at night, where you feel that you're part of something greater, that you're part of something that's awesome, that you meet somebody and all of a sudden you have this connection and you get the little goosebumps on your arms and say, oh my goodness. Well, part of what I wanted to do with this Threads of Connection was have people understand that you can look for these opportunities through the way that you live in the world and through the values that you have and the vocabulary you have to pass this on to other people. And that's why there are 18 of these 3-letter roots that move into words, and each of those is an opportunity through living out that value to be able to have a chance to connect your threads of connection to those that are out there in the universe. I'll just use this as a sample. It began with the light in the heavens coming down and its energy coming down. I had a little video kind of with images to show that at the ends of these threads of connection is where you would find the guiding principles. Maybe you can remember what that looked like. In the middle of the guiding principles was this letter. Does anybody remember what this letter was called? An aleph. An aleph, okay? And over the aleph in the center, I want you to imagine this as an outlet, like an electrical outlet. And the energy is coming from the heavens with this outlet. And if you remember the final image of this work is about becoming part of having a commitment to take an opportunity to connect to this outlet. And it's from where you are through the threads on your virtual or actual prayer shawl and how it is that you live through these values. You can plug into this energy. That's the energy that's part of the universe and be a part of this threads of connection. I started in the heavens at the moment with looking out, and if you've ever gone and seen the heavens on a clear night, it's as if there's a blanket coming and covering you and protecting you with this beautiful array of stars. So I thought of this array being a prayer shawl, okay? And in the prayer shawl, there's this opportunity for light, the light from the moon, the light from the stars, and all these other things. And this is almost like an eye, but it's almost like a sun and a moon. And if you look in the other room, you'll see the light bouncing off of it. So I wanted to, again, express what this is about light. In the other corner, you see that there's a strand. And part of the text of the Torah is to command people to have strands, threads, and what they are in Hebrew is tzitzit in the corners of your garments. But that's kind of mysterious. It really doesn't say too much. Most ritual items have a deeper story, a backstory. And the backstory to these tzitzit is that you can look at them. And this is part of a mystical explanation. Is you look at them and every wrap and every knot signifies something more than what you're just looking at. It signifies, again, how to live in this world. And then, as I said, you're supposed to have them on the corners of your garments. You can have a virtual prayer shawl also to elevate your being into, you know, when you put a prayer shawl on, you kind of feel like you're royalty. It's like having a cape. It's like transforming yourself into something very special. So that's what I think of as the tzitzit, the strings in the corners of your garment, is that the story is a remind you of how to live. So again, we have text. Most things, you know, in the Torah, it's written as text, black letters on a white background. So when you only see the black letters, you can only read what's there. But when you understand that there's white space around those letters, and in that white space you find the rest of the story, and you bring the story to mean something to you, put it in a context that has meaning to you, that's based on these ancient words, then you have something with which to guide yourself through this life in this world. And it's wisdom that's come from so long ago, and ancient words that have been repeated throughout time. So you receive that part of it. What I like to end with is that this contains 5 of the words that come from 5 of the roots, 5 different words. And I think what it does is send people off with something that is fairly simple. You can see the words up here in gold. You can see the words down here in gold, which is what they are translated to when we came to the end of this study of these. I showed you the words at the beginning, which were quite direct and simple, but as I drilled down into the knowledge of Hebrew and studied it more deeply, I came to understand how these words are special and can be meaningful to people. And so I found this piece that has 5 of the words. Where this is in italic is commentary on what this says, and this is what it says. So, Shimon, the tzaddik of righteousness and justice, there's one of our words, was among the last of the great assembly. So these words come from thousands of years ago. And he would say that the world stands on 3 illuminated words. On the radiant Torah teaching, so whatever the teaching is, to learn, to teach, to delve and grow wise. On the service, to connect the below to the above, the within to the beyond, the limited to the limitless, and the finite to the infinite. And on acts of devoted loving kindness, to give without desire for repayment, whether with money or with deeds, whether to the rich or to the poor, whether to the living or to the dead, but above all, to the dead, for they can never repay. So really, what I want people to understand is that it's an opportunity coming into this, depending on how deep you want to go. You can just take it as a beautiful, hopefully beautiful, environment and go through it that way and move on. But if you wish to go deeper into the language, into understanding the language, and into understanding how to receive from it, understand that it's a way of having values that you put words to. These are specifically words out of the Jewish tradition in Hebrew, but most traditions have words like this. It's pretty core and universal as to kindness, serving others, and understanding what the teaching is from the very beginning, what the words were of the great teachers about how to live in the world. I want to thank you again for giving me of your time so generously and being here to be part of this. So thank you. Thank you.